Morning, everyone. Time for me to get stuck in, literally, to the Hammer Horror Dracula movies. Let's put this phone down here, see if I can balance this. Sorry about this. Just going to try and see if I can balance this. That's better. Right, no shake. It might just drop, but no shake. Right, I'm finally on there. So, I'm going to talk about the Hammer Horror films, not get too close to the camera. And the Dracula movies, of which there are 9, or at least I liken it to 9. What I'm going to say first about this is that this is just my opinion. All these rankings are my opinion. You may not agree with me, and that's absolutely fine. It doesn't mean I'm wrong or you're right, or vice versa. But also, everyone ranks these films differently because they mean different things to different people. And even through time, my thoughts on these movies have changed, with the exception of one. My thoughts on these movies have changed. And that's just how it is. We like what we like. What I do find interesting, going through a whole bunch of rankings of these movies online, is how there are a lot of people out there who have put films that I've got really low on this list, really high. And some of the films that I've put really high on this list are very low on other people's lists. You'll tend to find, what I'm saying is, you'll tend to find there's such a diverse level of interest in Hammer, and people seem to, especially horror aficionados, like their films to a degree where one movie you hate, somebody else will love, but the reasons they love it might be the same reasons you hate it. And it's really interesting. It's just what makes us unique and makes our tastes just that, tastes and a subjective opinion. So this isn't a my list is right, yours is wrong sort of a thing, and I thoroughly expect some people won't agree with the placement of them all, but they don't need to, because that's just where I've placed them. And it's where I've placed them now, rather than where I might have placed them 10 years ago, etc. So I'm going to kickstart. Hopefully these videos will be a bit shorter than the usual, because there's a lot of stuff I want to get out in content. But I'm going to kickstart this with my number 9 film, the only one of the Dracula movies that I actually don't like, which tells you the fact that, I like all the rest to various degrees. And it's the one that's always been at the bottom of my list. The first time I saw it, I hated it. The second time I saw it, I thought it was awful. I only watched it the third time because it was part of a Dracula series of films that me and a few friends were watching. And I watched this again recently for the 4th time. I've watched all of these films basically pretty much over the last couple of weeks just to get them all fresh in my mind again. And I've watched this again recently, and even now I still find it very hard to enjoy it. I just think this is a legitimately bad, bordering on awful film, and that is 1973's The Satanic Rites of Dracula. This was the very last pairing between Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing as Van Helsing and Dracula, and it was also Christopher Lee's last Dracula film for Hammer. Now, he would go on to do another Dracula movie, Dracula and Son, in 1976, which was a French comedy. And after this, he said he'd had enough. Now, interestingly, with Christopher Lee, who's an actor I loved, he said he had enough of pretty much every Dracula film since the first one, and yet kept coming back for various reasons. But I find it mad that he'd had enough of Dracula after this, and yet 3 years later decided it was fine to play Dracula in a comedy movie that's pretty awful. The reasons he didn't want to do Dracula, not necessarily being true to the source material, etc., or stretching credibility of the character too far, or whatever, were even worse with that film. So it would have been nice if he would have stuck around for one more film, and a really good one. Peter Cushing would do one more Dracula movie after this, which we'll be talking about in another time. But this was their last pairing. And that's one of the best things about it, the fact that there's a chemistry between these two that had lasted since, the 50s, that is very evident on screen. These two were not only great actors in their own right and legends, but they were great friends. And you could tell that chemistry and friendship was absolutely there on the screen, because any scenes they're in together, they steal. I also think Peter Cushing here, he'd got to this point several years after his wife's death where he was looking very very gaunt and very thin and skeletal. And there's something haunting behind his eyes. There's a level of sadness and loss after his wife died that's evident in all the films he did after. Even whether he's playing good guys or bad guys, he looks haunted and tragic, and Peter Cushing was just mesmerising to watch. Phenomenal. He had better acting than Christopher Lee. Christopher Lee had presence. There's something really haunting about his role as Van Helsing here, which I really like. So them two on screen together, their charisma shines. The rest of the film, I mean, where to begin? Because I don't want this to be too long. So this is just mad. This is a film in which Dracula is now the CEO of a company that are secretly trying to create a bioweapon by recreating the plague using scientists to unleash on mankind and bring about an apocalypse. If that sounds like a bizarre idea for a Dracula film, it is. It's many people have said it's almost like something out of either the Avengers from the 1960s or a James Bond movie. And the fact that Lee would go on to play a villain in a Bond film the year after this, maybe it was, but it's just bizarre. So you've got this company, like I say, and these scientists are working on this plague. Now, only one of these scientists seems to come up with this plague, but the other scientists also seem to be involved in some sort of worship, which I'll get to in a second, which is just really odd. They don't think Dracula is going to unleash the plague. They think he's going to use it to ransom the world for money or something. So why they've made it, I don't know. Because when they find out his plan is to actually unleash it, they're as surprised as everyone else. Which is weird. But the film doesn't have a resurrection scene. After the last one, Dracula's dead. This company's been built in the space of a year on top of his remains. How he's ever been brought back to life when he's been encased in concrete, never explained, never answered. How he's come to the top of this company, don't know. Who resurrected him? No, there's nobody here who's done it. There's no idea of how he's come back, yet alone at the top of this company. All bizarre and mad, but here he is. He's the CEO of a company going by D.D. Denning. I would have liked C.D. Denning. I thought that would have been a better play on words, but never mind. And it's really weird that he's not in the film a lot, but when you see him for the majority of the time, he's in the shadows or in a suit, and it just seems weird. And when we do see him as Dracula, there's a bit where he's walking around the woods near the end where he just looks like Christopher Lee in the cape. There's none of the framing, the angles, the cinematography. It just doesn't look like Dracula. I will say that the one bit of it I do think is good. It's debatable, but when he gets snagged, and there are going to be spoilers in these because some of these films are like, almost 70 odd years old. When he gets snagged on the hawthorn bush at the very end, it looks terrifying. It looks painful the way he's reaching through. It looks like it really hurts, and it's just a great, horrifying image. And the last great bit of acting that Christopher Lee did. I find that his actual death is a bit pathetic in this. Not so much because he's got snagged on the hawthorns and then impaled, because the death scene, the way in which he disintegrates, that's all fine. And in fact, the way that Peter Cushing takes the ring off his corpse, which was the only thing left in the original Dracula when he died, is signalling a then intended finality to the story, which I think wraps it up well in that sense. But what I mean by pathetic is the fact that Peter Cushing jumps out of a window, Christopher Lee just follows him and just gets lost in the woods. And he's basically just walking around aimlessly until Peter Cushing realises there's some hawthorn. There goes, "Yoo-hoo, Dracula over here," and he just walks straight into it. It's one of the most pathetic endings of a Dracula movie that Hammer did because of how anticlimactic and forced it felt. And there was no... Because, I mean, what was Van Helsing's game plan here? Just to run through the woods and get lost? It doesn't work that way. It's a bad ending to a film. It's not the worst, in my opinion, but it is one of the worst. You've also got this side story involving this country house manor where there's these rituals where, like I say, said scientists are clothed and hooded and watching this Oriental woman trying to perform this ritual sacrifice on this willing, naked blonde, who you then discover doesn't actually die because her wounds heal. So there's some miraculous healing going on. What that has to do with the rest of this film, I've no idea, because this house is where, operatives get kidnapped and get tortured, and there's a basement full of female vampires as well. What it has to do with this plague that Dracula is unleashing, it's like two separate films. It has no relevance whatsoever, and I was literally scratching my head thinking, what on earth is all this about? It's so disjointed from the rest of it. There's also this assassin that pops up, who's killing people and ambushing them. Why? I don't know. I still, after 4 times I watched it, I don't understand what any of that has to do with the main bulk of the story. It's just utterly, utterly bizarre. It seems like it's almost like they filmed 2 different movies and spliced them together, and then at the very end hoped no one would notice. The scene in which Peter Cushing's character creates a bullet out of a necklace, out of a crucifix to use on Dracula, I actually think it's quite cool, but nothing ever comes of it, unfortunately. He's trying to interrogate D.D. Denning because he thinks he's Dracula, and the reveal that he's Dracula is a bit naff. Joanna Lumley pops up as Jessica Van Helsing's niece. She was meant granddaughter. She was meant to be his daughter, but everyone was aware, like in the last film, of just how much older Peter Cushing looked now after going through the trauma of his wife's death and how that really devastated him, as well as illness. So she pops up, but she doesn't really do anything. The film's very cheap looking. Like I say, its editing and its storyline are all over the place. It just doesn't feel like a Dracula film or even a Hammer movie. It feels like something they cobbled together over a weekend with very little thought as to what it was going to really be all about. It's such a weird idea, such a weird story. It does at least bring Dracula into the modern day, which is one of the criticisms I have about another modern day film, that it doesn't. But I don't know. I just think of all the ones I could watch, when I think about Dracula films and think about Hammer and think about their movie style and production, this is everything I don't think about with Hammer. It just feels like some sort of bizarre 60s or 70s spy show with a vampire thrown in, with this weird taking over the world plot. And a load of just strange stuff. The bit where one of the police guys, he gets stuck in the basement, turns the sprinklers on to kill the female vampires, that's quite cool. But the rest of it, it's a pretty naff film. I'm not going to say it's an absolutely dire and watchable movie. It's not, but it is bad. I mean, on a scale of 1 to 5, I would have no qualms giving this a 1 out of 5. I think this is a properly bad film. There are worse. It's not a 0.5. It's not a 0, but it is a 1. My rating for 1 is just pretty awful. So that's The Satanic Rites of Dracula. Not a film I enjoy, and if you enjoy it, more power to you. There are plenty of people that put this in their top 5, even the top 3 lists. I know that people enjoy this, but I don't. I think this is pretty bad.